Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you to marklangfan.com, where we make Israeli security so easy, even a caveman can understand. Now, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about one of the most often not talked about subjects, okay, which is airspace. Now, you say, Mark, what does airspace have to do with the topography? Well, the issue is, if you give up the land, you have to give up the airspace. The Palestinians, we've talked in other talks about the water under the West Bank. The Palestinians want the water under the West Bank. They want the land itself, and of course they want the airspace. But what exactly is the airspace, and why is it important? Well, excuse me 1 second. With my map and overlay system, one of the overlays that I have is where all the Israel's air bases are. Now anybody who's looking at this should be saying, wait a second, Mark Langfan is trying to protect Israel's security, but Mark Langfan shows where all of Israel's air bases are? Everybody, the only people who do not know where Israel's air bases are the Jews themselves. All you have to do is Google Israel air bases, and I urge you to Google Israel's air bases, and you'll realize almost all of Israel's deepest security secrets of the location of Israel's air bases are totally public and available information. So I'm not giving anything away by showing the rockets, the air bases on this map. But now what I want to do is before I put the map down on the table, what I want to do is I want to remind everyone that this blue patch is 70% of Israel's population and 80% of industrial base. That's key. So now what are we going to do? We're going to take the map and we're going to put it on the table. Okay? Because what we're going to show is this is the green line, meaning everything here is the West Bank, and everything here is pre-67 Israel. This is the 1967 ceasefire line. So what does it mean to give up the airspace? Well, remember, these are Israel's air bases, and this is Israel's huge population center. So what it means is this, and this is why I call it my airspace curtain. I put it up, and all of a sudden, you see that if Israel gives up the West Bank, well, of course it has to give up the airspace of the West Bank, and therefore, no Israeli planes can go in here anymore. And if ever there's an Israeli plane that even touches this curtain, you're going to have Hanan Ashrawi in the UN saying, oh, Israel's violated Palestinian airspace. So that's the basic idea. But it gets a lot worse. In that right now, Israel has the airspace over the West Bank. So if ever there is an attack by any kind of Muslim or Arab planes, where does the battle get joined? The battle gets joined in the West Bank, far from the population center. But if you give up the West Bank and Israeli planes cannot go into here, then a Palestinian plane or an Arab plane could go to here and could not even be attacked by an Israeli plane because it's inside of Palestinian airspace. And lo and behold, those planes could fire missiles right into the pre-67 border. Also, Israel has radar and anti-aircraft weapons here again, if an Arab plane comes, those Israeli anti-aircraft weapons can deal with the threat here in the West Bank, far from the population center. But if instead you have Israeli weapon systems here that cannot fire on a plane in Palestinian airspace, then all of a sudden Israel's entire population is laid bare to a rocket from lethal attacks from any type of multiple or singular planes, or a suicide plane, a 747 filled with explosives. So this is part of the problem. And again, if this is the airspace curtain and Israel cannot go into here, then you can see that Ramat David, which is here, is essentially cut off from defending this population against an air attack from the east. That's the basic idea. This is what Israel's airspace would be if they gave a Palestinian state. This is the airspace. It's a wall that would defend against an Arab attack as opposed to laying Israel open to an Arab attack from the air. And that's the basic idea for today, in that I want everyone to visualize Israel's airspace without the West Bank airspace. And again, I want to emphasize to everybody that all of what I'm showing you is on my website, where I have articles. And I actually have an article that you actually can see the graphic that I just showed, meaning you have the airspace curtain and how exactly it would operate. And I have it in Hebrew and in English. And it's easily available on my website, marklangfan.com, which I strongly urge you to do, to go and visit. And I think that pretty much sums up the day, meaning, remember, the airspace curtain, which would be the airspace of Israel without the West Bank. Again, I want to thank you for coming to marklangfan.com, where we make Israeli security so easy, even a caveman can understand. Thank you, and shalom with a blessing.